So you're wanting to learn how to study jiu-jitsu effectively. In my experience, most students, when they start studying jiu-jitsu, is watching videos, going to class, taking notes, doing X, Y, and Z. They are really gung-ho at it in the beginning, but then they start to find it less effective. So then they kind of fizzle out and they stop doing it. That's because it gets very convoluted and they don't work together. In this longer formed video, I want to show you guys my three, what I call mini systems for how you can study jiu-jitsu. The ideas aren't hard to implement. The key to them is where you put your attention and energy and effort first, because it can be distracting and it can be overwhelming. So my goal for you guys in this video today, plant some seeds and give you some thoughts, or maybe even change your opinion on the benefits of studying jiu-jitsu. How's it going, everyone? My name is Chasen Hill. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I've been teaching and training now for over 15 years. So if you guys like all things jiu-jitsu, this would probably be a pretty good channel for you to subscribe to. Make sure you hit that bell icon and subscribe button. That way you're notified whenever the latest video comes out. Now, before we get diving into building the systems, there's a few things that I want to clarify here. We are going to be using something that I call my R.O.L.L method, or my R.O.L.L framework. And what the R.O.L.L stands for is researching, optimizing, leveraging, and learning. We're going to use what I call the big three and build a system using that R.O.L.L framework for each of the big three areas. The big three areas are going to be going to class, watching videos, and then taking notes. When you build a system for each one using this R.O.L.L framework, it adds what's called a compounding effect, meaning that if you build one system, then you build another one on top of it and another one on top of it, you get the benefits of each one moving forward. In my experience, that's where students kind of don't have everything laid out. They have bits and pieces, but they don't have it in a kind of unified system here. Going back to the R.O.L.L method here, you want to think about it as a flywheel or like a revolution. First thing you always want to do is apply the research mindset. Next thing is that we want to figure out how we can optimize something, and then we want to learn to leverage it, and then we want to understand the learning aspects, or kind of the big takeaways, or what can we do better next time. If you apply this to each one of those big three, you're going to see massive benefits. So let's get started, and I will lay out how the rest of this video is going to go. Imagine that at the top, we have these columns, and at the columns, it has R-O-L-L for R.O.L.L. Then on the left-hand side, we're going to have rows with this big three for each system. Class, then we have videos, and then we have notes. At the very end, or the very last column, we will have something called a closed system, meaning that whenever we have completed each of these checkboxes or each of these grids for our independent systems, then we are able to check this off and say, okay, we have a closed loop here, and we have it completely built. Quick break in the action here. I'll be teaching a free web training this Saturday on October 5th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We'll be going over this information and a lot more in depth with actual resources that you guys can use. If that's something you think you would benefit from, make sure you visit the registration link down below. One of the very first areas I want to talk about a little bit extra is the class system. The reason why we start with the class system is because it is the most important one to build. I call it the domino effect, meaning that it's the first domino that knocks down all of the other dominoes. If you build all of the other dominoes, all 50 of them, but then your first domino is so far away from the 50 and you try to knock it down, well, it doesn't hit all of the other ones. So we want to make sure we spend enough time on this one and setting up our dominoes in the appropriate space. That way, when they hit, they knock down and it continues to go forward. Even if you just apply this system alone, your jiu-jitsu will probably 10 times itself, especially if you do it in this order. Let's get started and talk about this first system here of the class. And we're going to start with the R of researching. When it comes to researching, there are going to be two categories that we're going to use for the rest of this video. The first category is going to be what we call class driven, And then the second category is going to be self-driven or self-guided. How do we research for class? I don't mean researching what time the class starts or where the class is or anything like that. I mean, actually doing a little bit of what we call pre-studying and researching either the move of the day or your own guidance before you show up to class. Some schools have a curriculum that is very detailed, that you know the day that you show up, what technique is going to be shown. And so therefore you could watch that technique before, you could review it a little bit and put some effort and energy into pre-studying, basically priming yourself to learn. So if you're a brand new student, it's essential, which we'll talk about what to do with that here in a second. If you're even an advanced student or you've seen the technique before, having that fresh reference, and then when you can watch it in class and pick up on those details, those new details maybe that you missed, it's a really big deal and is very helpful. Maybe your instructor says, hey, we're doing guard passing for the next 2 weeks. Probably a pretty good idea to research a little bit of guard passing before you show up to class. This could be watching videos. This could be reviewing your notes, which we'll talk about each one of those independently. You are thinking about that topic before just randomly showing up to class and going with the flow. When it comes to being self-guided, it's a little bit trickier. In my experience, this is like 70% of jiu-jitsu students, because I've not seen many schools have a really detailed curriculum or even kind of a framework that a school will follow, or a calendar or a curriculum of any kind. It's really, very valuable for a student to become self-directed at some point in their career. Because I'm telling you guys right now, as a black belt, no one calls me on a daily basis and is like, Chase, what are you training today? You know, what do you think your jiu-jitsu needs? No one's checking in on me. I have to be the decision maker to that. And one thing I wish I would have done a lot earlier in my career is understand that and know that's what I was supposed to do, and have somebody tell me and kind of feed me some breadcrumbs on how to do that, which is why this system is so important in my opinion. As a default, I personally like to teach students that if you're going that self-guided route and you're going to start to research, you should really focus on figuring out what your gaps and what your weaknesses are, and really go into training with those mindsets in place. That's a whole separate topic and bear to tackle about how to do an assessment, how to truly identify your gaps and weaknesses, because they're not as obvious as you might think. Another strategy you could use if you don't know those things is what we call inquiry-based learning. Pick an area that you're interested in and then do a little bit of research on it and take that focus into class with you. And you're developing these questions and you're driving it with curiosity. Well, maybe you're a new student and you've heard these people talk about guard retention and you have no idea what that is. So now you go on the internet and you ask, what is guard retention? Why is guard retention important? What are some good guard retention techniques? And now you're inquiring and you're researching in your learning. Same thing, if you're going to go to class, you want to have an idea that you're wanting to pay attention to before just showing up. Even if your coaches teaches you something different than what you came into the gym with, guess what? It's okay. You can learn two independent things at the same time, especially if you have the system in place, which you'll see more here in a second. If you have your own guidance and then whatever your teacher shows is here, great. What I do is, if this is my self-focus and this is what they teach, if they don't correlate together, I take whatever my instructor shows and I say, that's cool, I'll save it for later. And then I still focus on this. That's where the benefit of note-taking is, and other aspects to remember that information. Now let's move on to the O aspect of optimizing. And when we say optimizing in class, we want to say, how can we make class more effective for us? The way that we can make class more effective is really in two ways. It's what I'm gaining from watching the class in a lecture format, and then how I'm actually training in class if there's drilling and sparring going on. If you are trying to take information in, basically when an instructor is showing the technique, you should be kind of split into two ways. If this is the first time you're learning this technique, you want to pick up on just the big ideas or the big concepts. I did a video a few weeks ago that you can check out right here that talks more about how to remember your techniques, that you guys can watch again. If you're more an advanced student and you've seen this technique a couple of times, you're looking for the details that maybe you've never seen before that are new to you, and you're trying to capture those ones that stick out to you. When it comes to the training aspect and we want to optimize, well, it's probably a pretty good idea that in the rolling or in the sparring aspect, because it's a little bit more free flow and you have more control over that, take the thing that you researched before class and try to do it actually in live training or resistance. Now, if you're drilling, you're going to drill the move of the day or whatever your instructor showed. It's great. It's beneficial for you. When it comes to live sparring, you have a lot more control. Your coach isn't controlling you with the video game controller. You don't have to just do the move of the day. You can really, in training, try to funnel your ideas into what you already pre-studied before showing up. When you kind of go one, then two, you do researching, then optimizing, it really starts to maximize and leverage your time on the mat. Now let's talk about how do we actually leverage class? What other areas can we use? Two of the big resources that I see students kind of forget about a lot is their instructors and their training partners. Number one, with instructors, you guys don't leverage them effectively. What I mean is that you ask terrible questions, and it's not your fault. Their curiosity gets the best of them, and they ask like the million what if questions. They ask like, what if a guy comes in off the street and has like a Ninja Turtle shell and tries to hit me in the back and does X, Y, and it's like stuff that my fourth graders would ask me. You should go and try the move. Just keep your anxious thoughts to yourself. Try the move, see if it works. And if you're having problems with the details, then ask the intelligent question about that. There have been studies that shown that people ask what if questions have too much of a wondering mind and they struggle with retention. And that's because they get sidetracked and they're losing the important details that come in. And so you're anxious that you're going to miss everything, and then you get sidetracked and then you miss the important thing that helps you feel more secure. It's kind of a deep spiral effect. Try your best to kind of just go out there, practice it, see what happens, and then ask the questions if it's not working, because now your questions are more self-guided to that. Now, once again, if this is a technique you have done before, then your question will probably be a little bit more intelligent because you have data to pull from. How do you leverage your training partners? Well, you could ask for feedback after every round. One trick is ask for advice. I would not ask for feedback, even though I use that term. Something about when you ask for feedback, people will like either feel sorry for you, and so they won't give you intelligent feedback, or they'll give you really, really harsh feedback. But when you ask for advice, you're positioning yourself as being humble. What you're saying is, hey, do you have any advice for me? Is there anything I could do better in that round? Now you're opening that door to that criticism. And if you have an issue with that, that needs to be an inner looking ability. What you're doing from the person that's asking the question is you're actually getting what you want. If you just say, do you have any feedback? What comes out of their mouth may not be what you're looking for. We need to be effective and ask an effective question and say, hey, what advice do you have for me after that round? And now you're opening yourself to criticism. You're opening yourself to someone pointing out your weaknesses, and you can really get a lot of value that way, especially after training and rolling. Now, when it comes to learning at the end of class, you have to ask yourself, what aha moments did I have? I can't recall a single instance where I went to jiu-jitsu class, whether it was sparring, just drilling, just learning a technique, that I did not have an aha moment. If you're not having aha moments every time that you're training in jiu-jitsu, something is wrong. You're either really, really overconfident in your abilities, or you're just letting things fly right by you. I've had aha moments about changing from a C-clamp grip to a monkey grip to a thumbless grip, okay? I had aha moments that are that small. Everyone should have aha moments. Your job is to reflect on those and capture them, whether it's in a spiral or a sheet, and then reflect on them and try to incorporate those into your game. That is learning from mistakes or seeking the questions to that. That's a very easy thing that you can do after any type of class, after any type of open mat. You literally just write out the question, what aha moments did I have? If it's one, write down one. If it's 20, write down all 20 if they come to your thoughts. The trick is that you don't want to make it hard. Don't sit there and say, oh, I'm going to have to do 10. Don't do that. That makes it a challenge, And that makes you want to move away from it if you don't have 10. Now you're seeking and you're really getting annoyed and you're getting pissed off at yourself. But just open up your binder and say, what aha moments do I have? Oh, I realized that I forgot to hold the arm here. My hand wasn't deep enough in the collar. I let him grab my legs too early. And then you write those down and that's it. You shut it and you move on. But at least you have captured those aha moments. And those are what you can reflect on, especially when we circle back to the research before the next class. When you're capturing that aha moment, and then you're now priming your brain and you're reflecting on the past information for your next class of researching. Now we have closed our loop. Then you are getting yourself ready because hopefully you're not going to make those same mistakes. So you're priming your brain for this next week's lesson. You're reflecting on the last lesson that you trained on. And it's a constant system that just keeps going forward and keeps building on top of each other. The other thing you can do about learning is ask yourself, well, what could I do better in this system? Maybe you didn't pre-study, right? Maybe you forgot to watch a video. You forgot to read your notes. You forgot to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I could have done that better. Did I optimize as best as I could? Did I ask as good of questions? Did I ask for feedback in a useful way? No, I didn't. I could improve that again. So the learning aspect really needs to be, what did you learn and what can you do better? If you're always thinking about you and be selfish and say, what can I do better? It really takes that ownership and that self-guidance into your hands a lot sooner and a lot earlier. We call this accountability in a lot of other circles, but it is a form of self-directed. And trust me, you're not going to get in trouble at your gym. No one's going to be mad at you. Actually, I bet your instructor is kind of hoping that you do this. We have closed our very first system here of the class system. As I said earlier, that's the most important system and the first one that you should focus on. That's why we spent the most time on that one. Let's get into system number 2, talking about the video system. We're still going to be using this R.O.L.L framework. When it comes to videos and it comes to researching, well, I have to ask the question, what am I going to watch? What am I going to research with the videos? What am I trying to get out of them? If we're going back to our 2 categories of researching here of class or self-directed, well, if I know my instructor is going to be teaching a tripod sweep today in class, it's probably a pretty good idea that I could watch a video on a tripod sweep. You don't have to watch the full instructional over the tripod sweep. Whenever you're doing pre-studying, you only need to do 10 to 15 minutes of what's relevant. That's it. You don't need to watch the 8-hour instructional before class. Watch the tripod sweep if you know that's what's being taught or the series that's being taught, and then use that as your priming and pre-study. Make sure that your video watching is in conjunction with whatever you're doing in class. That's how you can use the class directed format. At my academy, where I teach and train, we have a fundamentals program, and we have all of the lessons that we teach in that fundamentals program shot on camera, and the students know what lesson is going to be taught, what techniques are going to be taught. We encourage the student to watch those lessons before class, and it's very, very obvious. And we've been doing this for 8-9 years. I've seen the results directly affected actually in a group environment class. That's why I know it works. Now, if you're doing the more self-study and the self-guided, yes, you're going to have to watch the videos that are relevant to you, but that makes a lot more sense. If you knew your gaps and your weaknesses, you would be watching videos on that to try to optimize when actually you get into class and start training. Now that moves us over into the optimization of the videos. If you are doing the class directed or the self-guided, what you are doing is you're watching the video with intent. And this is one of the best ways to optimize your viewing of a video or to get more effectiveness out of it. If you're doing it to solve a problem, if you're doing it to feed that curiosity and to feed that crave of that, then it's going to be a lot more satisfying to you and the information is going to be a lot more stickier. Where I see students that get kind of weirded out with videos, they just start watching a lot of randomness, but the curiosity sends you way out into left field and drifts you really, really far away. And that's the problem with it. Funnel your curiosity into what's beneficial for you. Now, you could also be watching matches and things like that if you're trying to gain something out of them. One of the best things to do is watch yourself on video and to do self-study because that's really going to land with you and you're really going to be watching that with intent. And then a bonus tip there is if you can send it to a coach or a training partner and ask for, hey, do you have any advice for me on this? They can analyze it and it's a different pair of eyes. The next aspect is how do we leverage videos? And I'm going to use kind of a comparison and contrast here. One of the awesome things about training in 2024 is that you guys have the internet, the access to thousands of hours of jujitsu content at the snap of your fingers, which is a blessing, but also a curse. If you were training, let's say in the 80s or in the 90s or even the early 2000s, you had to go to class for two reasons, really. You went to class because you could train. That's where training partners were. That's where the mats were. And so that's where you went to practice your jujitsu and practice your skill. The other aspect was resource to learning jujitsu was the instructor or your teammates that were there in class. You had to go there for training and for learning. But I'm telling you guys, like videos now, the amount of information you can learn and you can access is amazing. You could almost follow someone else's curriculum outside of your own gym and just use your gym for the sparring and rolling. I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying you literally could, because the video quality is so good now. Instruction is getting so much better. People are getting used to learning from videos that's extremely beneficial. Is there benefit to absolute learning in class? Yes. Feeling someone do the move on you, having someone put hands on you and correcting is giant benefit. I'm just saying you could do an 8-hour instructional on guard passing and have that at your fingertips. You used to have to wait years to see that depth of guard passing. Now you can pay a couple $100 and have that as a library or a resource for yourself. I think what happens is students, when they buy videos, they buy things that are feeding their curiosity too much and not best for what they actually need. If you're going to spend money on instructionals, buy it for what you need, not to feed your curiosity. Use YouTube for that. Now, you could find what you need on YouTube as well, but when you spend money on things that are curiosity based and it turns out to you can't do anything with it, you feel jaded and you feel resented from that. You guys have all of this amazing resources that you can access at the snap of your fingers with videos that you can really optimize. That allows you to leverage time, because now you could be using this time when you're not on the mat to learn and deepen your knowledge in a specific area. And then when you actually show up to train, you have that information to reference. So what are we learning from videos, right? You are learning more information, you're gaining more knowledge, and you're deepening your understanding. You're seeing things from different viewpoints and different perspectives, especially if you're watching self footage in training or in competition. Seeing yourself from the outside is massively beneficial. You're not really developing your skill like in practicing or drilling a technique, but you're able to gain that information and knowledge. If you focus on that research aspect that we talked about first, either class driven or self-guided, that will create the intent for you. And then if you do those questions and, why is this important? Why is that important? Now, when you're watching that video, you're able to actually answer those questions while watching that video. That's how we continue to close this video loop system. Now we have the class system, we have the video system, and now we'll move on to the note system. Why is the note-taking system the very last one? Well, in my opinion, it's one of the hardest for students to employ. Usually students have parts or components of the class and video system, but with the note system, it is really, really foreign to them, especially the way that I encourage students to do it. Most students are like, I don't know the benefit of taking notes. I can't even write down all the details in time. I never review them and I never look at it again. I can see why you feel like note taking is not beneficial, but hopefully we can try to give you some help here. The first R here of the note-taking system, the research. How do I research for notes? What the heck am I doing? If we look back at the class-driven or the self-driven, I want to see if I have any notes over what's going to be taught in class so I can research my notes and I can see maybe those aha moments that I learned in the last time I did this class or the last time I did this technique? If it's self-driven, what did I do from the last class if I'm now studying the next class? So when you have these notes and you capture these thoughts, it makes for quicker and easier reference that you now don't have to sit here and spend a lot of effort trying to generate the memory. So notes are very beneficial because it's all about the capturing, and you're actually taking that load off of your brain and the pressure off of remembering and putting it somewhere else. This concept, second brain. And when you can develop a second brain almost where important information is stored, you feel a lot easier on your own brain. Now, there's a lot of cool software out there that deals with this, but typically, for jujitsu, you can make it simple with a spiral notebook. Being able to do researching inside of your notes is extremely beneficial. And we know too that the idea of writing and reading accesses different parts of our brain versus video watching and audio listening. They kind of cement the information in different parts. You're just kind of leveraging all the different parts of learning and studying whenever you're talking about note taking. Open software where I can just have a free roam of paper and I can write down and draw. So how do we optimize for note taking? Well, in my opinion, I personally like to do either a spiral notebook and paper, or like I use my iPad and I have a app that opens up that acts as a lot of free range paper. I like taking notes by hand, not in a linear format. I used to do it by linear format, but I found myself trying to type everything so much that it really wasn't as beneficial. So I just write down the 3 or 4 big details. If it's a brand new move, what the goal is, what the end outcome is, where did the move start from, very key things like that. And then if it's a move I've seen before, then I'm writing down the details I've never seen as well, or details that maybe I missed. But we know from brain research, taking notes on a pen and paper and writing is very beneficial. I know there are some good resources out there like a training journal and a training diary, and those are really good prompts just to get you into the habit of writing down, but you'll see why in the leverage section, why I like to use the iPad. So how do we leverage note taking? Well, outside of being able to just review what we did last time, imagine that you had 3 or 4 classes that you have done this week. So you have all these different notes and you have these big takeaways and these big aha moments, and you have these details that have been made about X, Y, and Z technique, or it's a new technique. If you take notes that way, what you're going to do is once a week, go back and look at them for like 30 minutes and try to synthesize them, basically meaning condense them, try to create lists where you can build categories of relationships and connections and how one move connects to the other one. Is there any similarities between these things? That is the giant benefit of taking notes on an open space, because now you can draw arrows and you can point to different areas and make new connections. And then if you are super duper on top of this, let's say you did it for 1 week and then now you're in week 2, after I've synthesized my notes, I'll go back and compare it to my synthesized notes on week 1 and see if there's any more connections there. Because it's accessing higher order of learning in your brain. It's comparing and contrasting. You're building those new relationships and connections and how moves connect together a lot easier. And we know that if we can understand how an arm lock leads to a triangle, and then that triangle, if he gets out, leads into K guard, leads into X, Y, and Z, that's going to be extremely beneficial. And if you've already spent time thinking about that, building those connections off the mat, imagine what you're going to do on the mat. Do you have to practice it? Do you still have to hit it? Absolutely. But regardless, the idea and the memory has to be generated either way. You're just doing it off the mat a lot sooner. And to me, this is like the superpower of jujitsu. When you can get your other 2 systems of class and videos, and then you get this note-taking system in place, they really start to compound. Now, when you go to class, this is a version of your priming. This is the version of your pre-study. Now, when you're watching videos and maybe your notes didn't make sense or you wanted to review and refresh information, now you could go back and watch the videos with this. When you combine all of these together, that's where you start to supercharge your jiu-jitsu. Now, the very last L of learning, really what taking notes does and what we learn from taking notes is not just capturing the new information or the new ahas or things of that. You're challenging your ability to recall. You're improving your memory. I heard just recently, which I really liked in a saying, was that most students spend majority of their time studying forgotten information. So they don't like studying because they're just studying the same thing over and over again. You have to do that because you're forgetting. So when we take notes like this and we follow the system, you're basically not forgetting as much in between each time. And that's the biggest benefit to the note taking system, is that you're really improving the skill of recall and the retention and the encoding process on top of the physical training and the sparring and the drilling that you're also doing as well. You start to imply the system is that instead of maybe if you learn something and it peaks and it drops all the way down here, start to review it again, you have to go back up that peak again. I just wanted to go like this, boom, and it just drops a little bit, then it comes back up, and then it goes higher than it was before. That's what allows you to keep learning a bunch of new information on top of each other. Sometimes this is really where the big benefit of just training more frequently actually has some validity, because if you're training more frequently, the chances are that you're probably doing the things that you did yesterday again today, and then so on and so forth. Unfortunately, most students don't have that luxury where they can train 6 or 7 days a week, but you can challenge your brain in ways with these types of systems to simulate that as best as you can and be reviewing that information. Usually synthesizing your notes only takes about like 30 minutes or so, especially if you're only doing it from 1 week to 1 week. I have a couple of students, whenever they join my program, they like to go back and do this for their entire notebook. I don't really recommend that you have to do that, but it's kind of a fun exercise if you like to do, if you're a jiu-jitsu nerd. That's going to close our very last loop here of our note-taking system. So we have our 3 systems built. We have our class system, we have our video system, and now we have our note system. Just as a quick recap, the first place you should start, the first R of researching. I cannot tell you how pivotal that step is. If you do nothing else from this video but that, you will get a lot of benefit moving forward. There, some students already do pieces and parts of these, but they don't do it in a succinct order. They have it all out of place. They do it very randomly and sporadically. But when you can start to build habits that encourage these aspects, it makes your jiu-jitsu training a lot easier. Now, remember, the goal isn't for you to walk away today being able to apply all of these things. Follow it each step. And if you do some of these things, find the gaps, find what orders you do it in, and see if you can rearrange it. Use my framework to fill in the gaps that you don't do maybe, and try that out for just a little bit of time. And I promise you, you will start to see the benefits. That is going to wrap up the end of this video. Hopefully you guys like this information. Let me know if you guys are wanting more long-form content. I'll be teaching a free web training this Saturday on October 5th at 1:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you guys are interested in getting more details about this type of information, I will be teaching it in more in depth. There will be a link down in the description below to where you can register. And with that being said, good luck, and check out one of these 2 videos that are going to pop up right here.